Okay, so to say that I am enthusiastic about doing PCOR work doesn't come close. But the reality is, and frankly, Dr. Reeve mentioned it just a minute ago, is it's expensive. However, we at OI Foundation and as part of the OI community have a real advantage. My disclosures again, which we'll ignore. So I'm pleased to say that OI, like many other groups, recognized early on that we needed a registry if we were really going to understand what's going on with our very diverse community. Dr. Jay Shapiro gets credit for his early Johns Hopkins registry, and there were some quasi-attempts. There were the early linked clinical research centers who provided the data that helped us get the U54. I did something called the Adult Natural History Initiative, but it wasn't really until the OI Foundation, in partnership with Baylor and the other sites nationally, achieved a U54 grant that we were able to really push ahead. And that is the OI Natural History Study, which I think and hope everyone on the call recognizes. Developing a registry, an online registry, was actually part of that grant and was terrific. The irony is the grant has just been renewed, but they specifically excluded registry support. Well, we have a far-flung community, and if we're really going to engage the whole community, we need a mechanism with which to do that. And so Tracy, in partnership with the OI Foundation, said, nope, we're going to keep this going. And so right now the foundation is continuing to support the OI registry. It is still situated at the University of South Florida, while all our other data has moved to Cincinnati. This really is something that can be used by everyone. Right now, it's primarily been used by myself as a pilot study for the original BBDC grant and by Deb Krakow. And I really want to compliment Deb's work on problems in pregnancy, which really had not been addressed up until that project. If you think about it, it is and will be our primary communication and survey tool as we move forward with our PCOR initiative. We have a very simple registry right now, and so what we can do is develop survey tools, put them through the USF IRB. We don't have the right to just send them out. We can send them out to folks and ask them to fill them in and get them back to us. And we can then download that data and analyze it. All right. There we go. So where are we right now? So I thought you might be interested. We have over 1,500 individuals or caregivers who have joined up and signed up on the registry. Initially, we were a little laissez-faire, and some people did and some people didn't respond to something called information about you, and we need to correct that. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, we've had wonderful success already using the registry. One of the interesting things is the interest of the community in registries. And so, in fact, what we do know is at least 62 countries are currently represented on our registry. That's sort of good news and bad news, and we have to be careful about how we stratify data, particularly when it comes to access to care. We know a little bit about who the folks are. And one of our challenges going forward is something that I have demonstrated in my early ONI paper and others. Many people do not know their OI type, or if they think they do, they're wrong. And so in our original ONI study, we had several people who thought they had type 2 OI, and yet they were in their 50s and 60s. And my assumption is that this is left over from when we had congenita versus tarda. So we need to do a basic educational campaign, and we need to develop ways of stratifying folks that are rational, but don't necessarily use a number system. And as you hopefully are aware, Dr. Salentz has actually gone a long way towards that already. As might be predicted, the majority of folks do have type 1, but we have a significant number of folks with type 3 and type 4, as well as other types who are on board with us. Just a brief overview, perhaps a relief, particularly with the PCORI virus. Only 23% of our folks reported lung problems, hearing loss, again, less than 50%, and dental problems, always a concern. Now, what's our future? What are we going to do? Well, first thing is right away, we want to reissue something called Information About You, which was a terrific questionnaire designed by Reed Sutton when we first put the registry up, but it left out a few things like vertebral fracture and whatnot. So as we go forward, we will be soliciting information from members of this call today to help us make that a slightly better starting point on who's out there without going too much in depth and gathering too many data points and turning people off. As much as possible, we want to harmonize what we ask, and this goes a lot with what Bryce was saying, that there are now a number of different international data collection efforts, and we want to be sure that our questions and their questions are as similar as possible as we try to track how folks with OI are growing up and aging. We are ever so optimistic that folks on this call will want to help us develop a strategic plan and a governance project, a governance structure for future programs. One of the things that has come back to us over and over again is, I participated in the study and I never heard anything about the results. So the beauty of this online gathering, once we get that data analyzed, we can use the online platform to share the data, as well as all the other wonderful connections that Tracy has developed with the OI community. And clearly, we don't have money now, but what would it take? We want to explore opportunities for additional funding so that we can help provide a research infrastructure that supports folks on this call, for folks in the community, to do their projects, rather than reinvent the wheel at every academic location. Oops, come on, turn. Okay, why won't this, one of the readings I sent to you, and I really hope you'll take some time to look at them, are the reports created by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and the Muscular Dystrophy Association. These guys are light years ahead of us, but what they're doing is incredibly exciting. They have reached the point where people can put their data into their data banks just using their phone. They can mine the electronic medical record. They can participate in all sorts of ways. What this leads to is that, for instance, when a pharmaceutical company wants to do a study on someone with this genetic variant in that age range, that the associations can send out a notice to people on the registry saying, okay, if you're interested, here is a link to a study that you might want to be involved in and you might benefit from. Notice, privacy is totally protected. They don't turn over lists of names to the drug companies. Rather, they inform the community about opportunities. So, and needless to say, the thing I care the most about is that both of them have done tremendous work in identifying the changes that are going on with the disorders that they're following and helping, therefore, go into comparative effectiveness research efforts, really provide their communities with the best, the most cutting edge information on how to help individuals live the highest quality life possible. So I am more than a little bit excited about this work. We're at the beginning. We don't, at this point, even have the ability to accumulate data on individual respondents, other than to maintain that information about you, basic data. But we will get better. We will find that money. We will find that expertise. I really believe. But it will be slow. And you heard us say from the beginning, this is a 50-year project. So I hope there are young people on this call, because I'm not going to be here. But like our 401ks, hopefully it will grow over time and really provide a wealth of great information that help all of our patients. So, as I have been saying over and over through this, please be sure to write your name and email in the chat box. We will get our survey right out to you after this call. And I really thank you for participating in our event today. So I am now just a little bit ahead of time. If anybody has some questions before we go back to Courtney.
So, Dr. Tosi, we have a couple of questions here, as well as I'm seeing a comment from Tracy Moroy. I'm going to start with our question first, though. One thing is, the majority of today's sessions have focused on engagement and conducting PCORI research, but what does dissemination look like here?
Well, you know, I just feel so fortunate that I'm working with the OIF Foundation because there's so many ways to do it. Obviously, one always wants to get research published in a peer-reviewed publication because it gives greater credibility to what you've written. But the other reality is that we also want to share with the community as much as possible. Clearly, we will want to use the registry to be able to give feedback, early feedback on what did a survey show pre-publication, so to speak. The OIF Foundation also has an extraordinary social network presence for getting the word out for folks about new findings And I hope everyone has been to the OI Foundation's updated website, where we will, of course, put everything. It's easy to find your way around, and it is already provides a wealth of information, and we aim to expand it.
Great, thank you so much. So we have a couple more questions for you. So one is the information about you surveys demonstrates that many patients don't fully understand their diagnosis. What challenges does patient-reported data pose for the registry, and how can it be alleviated?
So we will try to share with everybody on the call a wonderful paper developed by Dr. Solentz now 3 or 4 years ago, in which he said basically, forget this 1, 2, 3, 4 stuff. It just confuses people. And he came up with basically mild, moderate, severe, and very severe categories. I would argue from a researcher's standpoint that the one problem with his presentation is the vertebral fractures play a big role. And I totally agree with him in that I certainly find that folks, even folks with occult vertebral fracture, are different. They are more severely involved. But sometimes people don't know the answer to that question. And so one of our real challenges will be to demonstrate or find a way to dig into that using words, not x-rays, for the folks who have never had an x-ray. So it isn't easy, but I am a strong believer that we can build from there. Now, having said that, I also had an experience a number of years ago when I was doing the ANI study, where I actually found someone who knew they were type 1, but reported themselves as having severe disease. How could that have happened? Well, that turned out to be very interesting. The individual had had a terrific life, married, children, grandchildren, career, but then went deaf. And that separated him from so many of the people he loved and enjoyed being with. So there's a lot of nuance here. This is a really great question, and how we improve, how we gather that data and how we stratify people will be very, very important, and we need a lot of help on this particular issue.
Thank you. Some more questions we have is, how do we protect patient privacy and rights in registries? I'll stop there.
So that is a really tough issue that we're going to have to spend a lot of time on, because frankly, one of the things that we want to do is be sure we harmonize with the OI natural history study. And because if you think about it, that is one of our best ways to validate anything we think we've learned. Because there we have a population that we can talk to and examine, and we have a lot of data on. I think that the technologies for protecting privacy are improving, and we will need to be expert at them. Again, it's part of the learning process. We're not there yet.
Great, thank you. I see a question here in the comments section. Would you like me to read it out loud?
Yes, please.
Have bisphosphonate studies and the ongoing sclerostin antibody studies included PROMs? If so, which ones? Were they considered primary outcomes, secondary outcomes, or exploratory outcomes? This is many parts, I apologize. How do we answer the PROMs? How do we assure that the PROMs are adequately powered to yield meaningful results?
Great set of questions. I am not as knowledgeable on this topic as I would like to be. I do know that the FDA has moved to wanting to hear about patient outcomes, excuse me, and that at least one of the drug companies has developed their own, so sorry, one of their own sets of quality of life measures. But I apologize, you've come to the limit of my knowledge on this.
Maybe I could add something to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you know, these PRO questions or parameters, if you will, or outcome measurements are in the protocol of these various programs. They're not the primary outcome, but they are included in that: quality of life, pain control, etc. And all that require, of course, patients report on it. So they are included in that, again, in a way which is not officially labeled PRO, but which is definitely present.
This is Matt Warner.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll go on video.
Yeah.
There I am.
Yeah.
So
Great.
let me follow up on what Francis just said. So if they're secondary outcomes, then they're not powered to necessarily yield statistically significant results. And I guess my question is, as we design studies going forward, should we be having patient-reported outcomes powered to achieve statistical significance? Or are we going to stay with the outcomes that we're already using, which might be fracture rates and bone mineral density, and not these other self-reported outcomes?
That's a good point, Matt. I go along with that.
And I think, Matt, that the FDA, as I understand it, is really looking hard at getting beyond fracture rates. And they are entertaining, actually, grants that to look at developing new measures that are meaningful to different communities. Once again, you've reached the limit of my knowledge, but that is a new avenue that they avoided for a long time, but I believe they're now very open to, and there's actually a partnership between FDA and NORD to work on better measures.
And this is Bryce. You know, just to build on to that, I think, you know, we're not suggesting that your traditional outcome measures are just going to disappear. I don't work in your space, so I apologize if the language isn't correct, but like the number of fractures or type of fractures or whatever, you know, if that's something that's traditionally been used for quite a long time, again, no one's asking that will just suddenly disappear and not be assessed in any particular intervention. However, I think what we are focused on, especially in patient-centered outcomes research, is, you know, for patients, you know, for them, they might not be able to translate like number of fractures or bone density or things to how that impacts their lives. So what might happen in patient-centered outcomes research is you'll be layering on some things like, again, you might be, your primary outcome might be number of fractures there, but your secondary might be is quality of life impact or functional impact. And those things might be additional things patients who want to see to help give some context about how the intervention might have, you know, might have statistical difference on your primary, but if it has no change on their overall functioning and quality of life, that might be judged to be not so meaningful from the patient perspective.
I agree with you there, but again, if it's a secondary outcome and not a primary outcome, then it may not be powered, right? The study designed to begin with may not have been powered to ask, do patients have a better quality of life after getting whatever intervention is given? So I think that's why it's important as these studies are designed to make sure that everything is powered well enough to answer what are the most important questions.
Yeah,
And,
I agree
the most
100%.
important question may not be bone density. It may be, does this drug make patients feel better, regardless of whether their bone density has gone up or not?
Yep, you said it better than I can. Great.
And the interesting, Chaya and Kara have a comment here that it's important to recognize physicians tend to significantly underestimate quality of life compared to what patients themselves rate their quality of life. That's even more meaningful when we consider that most quality of life measures are based on non-disabled norms. And she makes a push, unless we select good measures, quality of life really becomes a guess that's more based on people's beliefs about having OI versus actually having it. And I'm very grateful. Kara says this points to the great need and value of PCOR research. Thank you, Kara. All righty, well, we are now at 3:32 according to my clock. And so